Okay, so we're going to make some chicken stew with our bone broth, and I'm going to take this opportunity to demonstrate what's called a floating saute. So I typically am going to add a good amount of olive oil, and then because I like the flavor, good amount of toasted sesame oil, probably about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of each. It's going to be a big pot of stew. Then I'm going to add some cooking wine. Oh, actually, pardon me, it's going to be, that's red wine vinegar. So that was about a tablespoon of red wine vinegar, and then about a half cup of cooking wine, and about 2 ladles full of the bone broth, the primary stock, and then some ginger, and some onions. And then I'm going to turn on the stove, and that's sort of the trick with it, is to allow all of this stuff to mix together and make sure all the oils have a chance to float on top of the fluid before you actually turn on your stove. And then I'm going to let it heat up until I get a good saute going, and then I'm going to add some jalapeno peppers and some garlic, just because I want those flavors to not cook too long. And then after that we can add some roots and some leftover chicken from the roasted chickens, and some of the meat and skin from the original broth, and then we'll have some nice chicken soup. So we'll come back to that once it's sauteing. Okay, so the onions have had a few minutes to just saute and become a bit more translucent, so I'm going to add the jalapeno peppers, and then the garlic. Maybe just a little pinch of salt, not too much, because the red wine, cooking wine, actually has a bit of salt in it already. So just a little bit of salt. And then some freshly ground pepper. And just stir all that together. And give that about 3 or 4 minutes, maybe less, just see how it smells, and then I'm going to add some roots. So I'm going to add my roots, and today I'm having some purple potatoes and fresh carrots from my garden. Now this is probably a common sense kind of obvious thing, but I like to put my vegetables in basically in the reverse order of how long they take to grow, because roots like potatoes and carrots take quite a while to grow, then they take a little longer to cook. I think the only real exception would be celery, because it's got so much cellulose in it that it doesn't cook the way other starches do. So I'm going to put some more stock on top of this to cover them. And let that heat up, and probably get about 15 minutes, 10 minutes, somewhere in there, and then I'll add the rest of the vegetables that I'm going to have in my broth or in my stew. So the next step, the roots are in there, they cook for a while, so I'm going to add in the meat that was extracted from the broth as I was making it. You can check the video on how to make a traditional bone broth if you haven't seen it yet, just to see how that gets done. And now I'm going to just add some vegetables, and And then in a few minutes we'll have some yummy chicken stew. So there's some celery, little leftover leeks from yesterday, zucchini and broccoli, and a little trick here is when you're cooking with broccoli in a soup, you can take the stalk of the broccoli, just take the outer skin off, and then just use the center of the stalk just to get more out of it, because a lot of people throw that part away. And of course, once again, we're going to cover what we're cooking with our bone broth as our main stock. Now I'm going to leave just a bit of room because I'm going to add some coconut milk to this, just to give it a thicker, more creamy and rich flavor, more nutrients. And also it's kind of yummy. So we'll get those nice and hot, add the coconut milk, and then we're done. Okay, so the last step, chicken stew, add the coconut milk. Now a fun thing about coconut milk, depending on how picky you are about your food, is you actually don't want the coconut milk to boil, in the sense of a rolling boil, although it's okay to have it to like a slightly bubbling simmer. So once you've got all your vegetables cooked, the roots, the above the ground plants, you just want to stir in the coconut milk, let it dissolve. See, there's a little piece here that's going to have to melt a little bit. And once that coconut milk has melted, there's another big piece. It'll give the stew a nice thick and rich flavor. And the trick is to try and serve as much of this as possible right away, which I'm going to be doing, luckily enough. And then if I cool it off, I just want to heat it up really slowly and make sure that I don't boil it at a rolling boil with a lot of bubbling, because that'll separate the coconut milk and it won't be as thick and rich anymore. It doesn't mean it's bad for you, it's not going to ruin the flavor. It just doesn't have the same feel on your palate. So, having made your bone broth, having already had pre-cooked chicken meat, you can make this big pot of chicken stew in about 20 minutes, including the time it takes to chop up your onions, garlic, ginger, peppers, other things like that, chop your vegetables, get everything going. About 20 to 24 minutes is my average for a big pot of fresh, healthy, rich, and enriching chicken stew based on a bone broth, which I've either taken out of my freezer, taken out of my fridge, or cooked right away. Hope you enjoy.